You are not here to simply listen, but to feel a shift deep within the very core of your soul. What we are about to explore lives not in the mind's logic, but in the silent, shadowed chambers of the spirit, where pain is not a wall, but a doorway. I speak to you now as if you were standing before me, each of you holding a hidden story of survival, the quiet agony of having carried a burden that was never yours to bear, the profound change that occurs when a deeply feeling person has navigated the maze of a self-obsessed individual and lived to tell the tale. You might believe that making it out is the final chapter, but survival is merely the beginning of what comes next. After you have ingested a toxin, after you have been emptied by another's bottomless need, you are not just a shattered container, but the potential for a new shape, a new pattern emerging from the dust. So the essential question we must confront is this: who does the deeply feeling person become after this plunge, after this soul-deep ordeal? To start, we must understand what it truly means to be an empath in the deepest sense. Not just someone who is overly sensitive, not merely a person with thin emotional boundaries, but one who has been selected by the unconscious to act as a container for the projections, the unspoken and disowned shadows of other people. The empath often originates in an environment of psychological instability. From their earliest days, they learn to read the emotional weather of their caregivers, the hidden tensions of the home, the silent fears that hang in the air. Their perceptiveness is a coping mechanism, a method to bring order to chaos by reflecting what others cannot bear to see. And so, when the self-absorbed person enters their world, it is no coincidence. It is the magnetic pull of archetypes, drawing each other into a timeless dance. The narcissist is the living form of a rejected shadow, the persona that must feed on others to preserve its delicate, grandiose self-image. And the empath, by their very nature, becomes the one who contains, who soaks up, who ingests what the self-obsessed person will not acknowledge. But here lies the transformative fire. To take in the narcissist's shadow is a monumental task. It is to allow into your own lifeblood a poison that did not originate with you. It is to experience a guilt that was cast onto you, a shame that was not your own, a fury that was sown in your heart like a foreign object. This absorption can feel like a true end. The empath might lose their sense of self, adrift in doubt, questioning their own mind, trapped in a funhouse of mirrors, where the narcissist declares that their version of reality is the only one. But I tell you, in that very falling apart, in that very shattering, something profound is born. It is the path of the wounded healer, the shaman's journey into the depths, the breaking apart of the ego, so that the spirit may awaken to its true calling. When you endure such a trial, you are irrevocably changed. The empath who survives the narcissist is not the same person who first stepped into the maze. There has been an ending and a new beginning. You have held the shadow of another. You have grappled with the venom. And if you were not completely destroyed, then you have been fundamentally altered. The unconscious that orchestrated this test has also planted within you the seed of change. For what is survival if not a form of alchemy? The base metal of anguish, the quicksilver of disorientation, the fiery element of rage, all combined within the psychological container until a new substance is born. And so we ask once more, who do you become? You become the one who understands darkness not as a concept, but through direct experience. You become the one who no longer fears the void, because you have made a home within it. You become the one whose compassion is no longer blind. Your light is no longer unshielded, but your spirit carries the weight of one who has walked among predators and returned with vision that sees past facades. I want to show this with a vision. Picture a person who dreams they are in a grand hall. The feast is laid out, golden cups brimming with drink. But when they sit to dine, the food turns to dust on their tongue, and the wine transforms into something bitter. They glance around and see that every other person at the table wears a fixed, smiling mask. But behind those masks are empty spaces and gnashing teeth. Suddenly, they understand they too are wearing a mask. They tear it away and cry out. But when they see their reflection in the cup surface, they find their face is now illuminated, marked, yet brilliant. They awaken shaken, knowing they have witnessed a terrible and magnificent truth. This vision is the psyche's method of showing what it means to endure the feast of the narcissist, to consume the dust of deceit, to know the sharpness of control, to cast off the mask and discover that the true face beneath, though marked, glows with a genuineness that cannot be copied. This change is not free. Let no one tell you that breaking free from the narcissist's hold leaves you without marks. There are injuries, and those injuries will throb. You may carry a heightened alertness, a deep-seated caution, the faint whisper of the narcissist's voice that murmurs in the back of your thoughts. But those injuries are also carvings, emblems etched into your very essence. They tell you that you have undergone an initiation, for survival is not the evasion of hurt. It is the capacity to hold hurt until its purpose starts to show itself. The empath who has endured becomes a guardian of insight, a holder of shadow understanding. You are no longer just perceptive, you are discerning. You recognize the odor of deceit. You know the flavor of artificial affection. You can detect manipulation in the atmosphere like a coming storm long before it breaks. And this is a significant power, though it was earned through great cost. You might wonder, why must it be like this? Why must the empath endure the narcissist's shadow to awaken? I respond because the unconscious requires equilibrium. The narcissist cannot hold their own shadow. They cast it out, and it must find a vessel. The empath, conditioned from youth to carry what is not theirs, becomes that vessel. But the unconscious does not abandon them there. It leads them to a point of rupture, to a crisis where the toxin can no longer be tolerated. And at that instant, when everything falls away, when identity itself seems fragmented, the psyche gets the opportunity to rebuild on a more profound foundation. This is individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you were conditioned to be. It is a dangerous road, for many do not pass through whole, but those who do emerge with a lucidity and fortitude unknown to those who have never struggled with such profound shadows. There is a stage in the alchemical process known as the blackening. It is the phase where all is dissolved, where material decays, where the light vanishes. But it is exactly in this decay that the germ of rebirth is planted. The empath who has taken in the narcissist's shadow enters their own blackening. They feel ruined, hollowed, poured out, but if they persist, if they reject the false reality, then from that dark earth a new form begins to grow. And so who does the empath become? They become the alchemist of their own pain. They become the one who holds not only empathy but also keen judgment. They become the one who no longer offers their spirit without value, for they understand the price of such an offering. They become, paradoxically, more complete. Now, listen closely, for I must speak of the lingering peril. The empath, after surviving, might be drawn to seal their heart completely, to shut down, to vow, I will never feel again, never love again, never be vulnerable again. This is a natural reaction. It is the psyche's method of self-protection after catastrophe. But if this becomes a permanent state, then the transformation is unfinished. To heal is not to turn to rock, it is to turn to gold. To become rock is just another form of defense, another persona, and in time, the unconscious will rip it off. True survival means to open once more, but this time, not as a sacrifice, but as a sovereign being who knows its own power. You will still feel profoundly, but you will no longer be consumed by those feelings. You will still love, but you will not mistake love for self-erasure. You will still glow, but your glow will not be for those who come only to exploit it. Your heart grows larger, yet it is also guarded. This is the paradox of the empath who has survived. You are both soft and strong. Consider once more the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who has been injured in body or soul, and through that injury becomes able to mend others. This does not mean you will seek out narcissists to redeem them. That is the ancient pattern, the snare of perpetual self-sacrifice. No, the healed empath heals simply by existing, by living authentically, by carrying a light that is no longer gullible. You become a reflection in which others glimpse their own potential. You may guide, you may soothe, you may share knowledge, but you will not permit yourself to be used. In this way, the narcissist has, paradoxically, served your journey toward wholeness. Their shadow pushed you into the depths where you found your authentic strength. It is a harsh lesson, but a lesson all the same. And so I say to you, if you have absorbed the narcissist's shadow and endured, you are no longer just an empath. You are something more. You are one who has ended and begun again. One who has carried another's darkness and returned from the edge. One who has looked behind the persona and refused to become a persona yourself. You are not defined by what was inflicted upon you. You are defined by what you have forged through it. And what you have forged is nothing less than a spirit awakened to its own archetypal force. When we talk of becoming after survival, we must also talk of integration, for it is not enough to leave the labyrinth. One must bring out the wisdom concealed in its center. The empath who survives the narcissist stands at a junction. Either they suppress the experience, hiding it deep in their unconscious where it breeds resentment, or they meet it with bravery, letting it mold them into something more significant. Integration demands a facing of the shadow, not only the narcissist's, but your own. For what was it within you that permitted the narcissist to enter, to nourish themselves, to stay? Was it a desire for love? Was it a terror of being alone? Was it a hidden need to feel essential, to be the redeemer? These must be faced, for if they are ignored, the pattern will repeat. This is not about blame, but about awareness. To bring these drives into consciousness is not to condemn yourself, but to set yourself free. You see, the empath's greatest risk is not only the narcissist outside, but the unconscious narcissist inside. The part that flourishes on self-sacrifice because it provides a sense of purpose, the part that aches to be selected even at the expense of the soul. When this is witnessed, when it is confessed, then the metamorphosis is total, for you no longer act as an unconscious player in the drama, but as a conscious creator who decides differently. Think of the tale of the goddess taken to the underworld. She eats the seeds, and therefore she cannot go back to the world above, unchanged. She belongs partly to the dark domain, partly to the light. So too with the empath who has consumed the narcissist's offering, you can never go back to naivete, and that is not a deprivation but a sacred right. You will always carry the recollection of the underworld, the understanding of control, the memory of dust on your tongue, but this does not mean you are chained to sorrow. On the contrary, like the goddess, you become a bridge between realms. You can go into the darkness of another without losing your core, and you can rise into the light with greater substance. You are no longer ignorant about malice, but neither are you defined by it. This equilibrium is the sign of maturity, the evidence of individuation. Let me offer you another symbol. Imagine a person who dreams they are walking through a thick wood at night. They hold a light, but it wavers and only lights the immediate ground. They hear sounds rustling in the trees, blaming them, luring them deeper into uncertainty. Suddenly, they fall into an open space, and there, in the middle, is a looking glass, standing alone. They move closer and see their image, but the image is bound. They touch the glass and the bonds melt, but the reflection's gaze blazes with intensity. They wake with a racing pulse, knowing they have met a part of themselves they avoided. This dream, like the journey of surviving the narcissist, shows the need to confront both imprisonment and liberation, both frailty and power. The empath who has been tied by chains of blame and insecurity discovers in the act of survival the possibility of fire in their own gaze, a power that was concealed under the surface. The mirror reveals both captivity and release. Which will you choose to live? Now, we must stop here and consider what it means to hold darkness without being consumed by it. The narcissist's toxin does not just disappear when the connection is over. It remains like a stain. There may be times when you hear their tone in your head, criticizing you, making you feel small, claiming you were inadequate. These remnants are not proof of weakness. They are the leftovers of internalized projections. The mission is not to crush them by will, but to answer them with the power of your own awakened being. When the remnant says, "You are nothing," you reply, "I endured. Therefore, I am more than you claimed." When the remnant says, "You are unlovable," you reply, "I have learned my own worth. Therefore, I no longer crave your false devotion." This internal conversation is the ongoing work of individuation. You are taking back the landscape of your spirit, piece by piece, until the inner world no longer belongs to the narcissist's phantom, but to you. Do not be misled, however, into thinking this work is quick. The unconscious does not move at the speed of the ego's urgency. Healing arrives in cycles, sometimes calm, sometimes like a gale that pulls you back into anguish just when you believed you were liberated. But even in those gales, recall you are not who you were. You may feel the ancient ache, but you are not the same being. You have been broken open, and through those breaks, illumination has entered. You are more insightful now, more perceptive, less ready to give yourself up for the sake of another's falsehoods. And this, I say, again, is a monumental triumph. For the narcissist exists only where falsehoods are upheld. The moment you deny the falsehood, their influence over you shatters. You become unreachable. not because you are impenetrable, but because you are conscious. What then is the fate of the empath who has survived? It is not just to exist free from narcissists. That is too limited an ambition. Your fate is to become a carrier of illumination tempered in shadow, to live a depth of compassion that does not mistake itself for self-destruction, to walk among people as a living testament that suffering, when embraced, can become renewal. You are a living symbol among symbols. Others who are still caught will notice something in you. They may not name it, but they will sense your presence as both solace and provocation. Solace because you comprehend their hurt without condemnation. Provocation because your very existence reveals their deceptions. This is the contradictory purpose of the survivor: to hold within you both salve and blade, to mend and to separate, to show the truth merely by being as one who has witnessed and persevered. Let us reflect on the archetype of the mythical bird rising from its own end. This symbol has become so familiar that its potency risks fading. Yet, if you contemplate it sincerely, you see it is not just a symbol. The empath's former self truly is consumed in the flames of the narcissist's shadow. What is turned to dust is the identity that once thought love must always mean limitless giving, that once mixed up empathy with self-negation. From that dust arises a being who knows their value, who carries flame in their essence, who can soar above manipulation instead of sinking under it. But unlike the legendary bird, this rebirth is not for you alone. It holds within it a purpose. You are reborn not only for your own sake, but for the whole. The unconscious of humankind requires those who have seen, and you become such a witness. You testify even without speech that endurance is achievable, that shadow can be withstood, that the spirit can be reshaped. You may observe that after such a shift, your very sight of reality changes. What once felt permanent now shows itself as persona and archetype. You perceive more acutely the roles people perform, the identities they adopt, the projections they throw. You may at times feel separate, for once you have seen behind the veil, it is hard to unsee. Yet this separation is also a present. It frees you from deceptions that once held you. You are no longer so readily captivated by praise, nor tricked by charm, nor caught by shame. You stand apart from the collective trance. This can be isolating, yes, but it is also the dawn of authentic liberty. For liberty is not just the lack of chains, it is the presence of knowing. I must stress again, do not hate what you have undergone, for though it was brutal, though it almost ended you, it has also awakened in you capacities that could not have emerged otherwise. The narcissist, in their endless craving, acted as the tool that hammered the metal of your soul. It was painful, it left marks, but it also forged you. Now you are a container, not of weakness, but of resilience. Your empathy has not vanished, it has become richer. You feel still, but you feel with awareness open. You love still, but you love with wisdom. You give still, but you no longer mix up giving with vanishing. This is the alchemy of survival. There will be instants, I know, when you grieve for the self you used to be. You may long for the simplicity, the unprotected warmth, the clear faith. But simplicity is not the ultimate virtue. Completeness is, and completeness is not pure brightness, but the integration of brightness and shadow. The empath who has survived holds both within them. They are no longer saint nor casualty. They are a complete human being, powerful and gentle, radiant and marked. They walk the earth as a living contradiction, and in this contradiction resides the key to true individuation. So I say to you now, you are not merely survivors. You are initiates. You have passed through a test that left you exposed, and what remains is not less than before but more. Do not belittle yourself by stating, I am damaged. Instead, declare, I have been reshaped. Do not hold on to resentment, though resentment is alluring, for it will turn your injury into rock. Instead, hold your injury as holy, as the location where something sacred entered you, for it is in our injuries, not our flawless states, that the spirit shows its authentic face. And you, empath, who has endured, carry that unveiling within you. When the empath rises from the ashes of survival, a peculiar quiet arrives. It is the quiet after the tempest, when the noise has faded, when the downpour has ended and the ground still holds the memory of fury. Many misinterpret this quiet for vacancy, for detachment, but it is not vacancy. It is the psyche recalibrating, making itself ready for a new direction. In that quiet, you may feel untethered, stripped of the old self that once discovered purpose in giving, in fixing, in being the container for another's unvoiced demand. You may ask yourself, who am I now? If not the one who fixes, if not the one who endures? This query is the start of the more profound voyage. For to lose the old response is not to be vacant, but to be receptive. The unconscious has hollowed out room inside you, and it waits for a new vision to form. A vision not commanded by the narcissist, nor by the habits of your past, but by the self itself. That pattern of wholeness that has been leading you through the shadow all along. Do you perceive then how essential the collapse was? Without it, you would still be revolving in deceptions, still mistaking martyrdom for love, still confusing empathy with fate. The narcissist's shadow compelled you into the furnace where lies could no longer live. And now, in this quiet, the self murmurs. It does not yell. It arrives in visions, in symbols, in sudden knowings that appear from the depths. Perhaps you dream of moving through a destroyed place, only to discover a single plant growing between the rubble. Perhaps you dream of a young one handing you a tool, though you do not know what it opens. Perhaps you find yourself pulled to quiet, to the natural world, to the still places where your own life becomes your guide. All of these are signals that the psyche is reorganizing, that the empath is no longer merely a receiver of others, but a finder of their own inner reality. It is here that the archetype of the champion enters. You may not see yourself as a champion, for your history was not one of victory, but of persistence. Yet persistence itself is champion-like, to endure when another has consumed your light, to keep living when your spirit has been tainted. This is a type of courage as deep as any conflict, but unlike the champion of legends who defeats the monster, your monster could not be defeated, for it was internal and external. It was in the narcissist, and it was in your own shadow. Your purpose was not to conquer, but to persist until transformation happened. And now, having persisted, you hold within you the reward that the champion always brings back from the depths. Understanding of shadow, understanding of deception, understanding of the endurance of the human essence. You carry the light forged in shadow, and like all genuine champions, you are summoned to use this understanding not only for yourself, but for others. The champion is never reborn for their own benefit alone. They come back to the community, bearing illumination, bearing remedy, bearing sight. But here I must warn you, the empath who has survived is susceptible to a new snare. The snare to identify themselves only by survival. You may clutch your narrative of suffering as if it were your identity, stating, "This is who I am, the one who was shattered and endured." But an identity constructed only on survival is still a partial one. You must move beyond survival into becoming. Survival is the starting point. Becoming is the fulfillment. If you halt at survival, you risk becoming hardened, forever orbiting your injury. If you advance into becoming, you let the injury be changed into power, into compassion, into sight. The narcissist intended to shrink you to an echo of their void. Survival guaranteed that did not occur. Now you must guarantee that survival itself does not become a cage. Do not just survive, become. What does this becoming resemble? It may not be loud or noticeable. It may be as quiet as voicing a truth where once you were mute. It may be as significant as refusing, where once you could only agree. It may be as delicate as sensing control in a word and choosing not to engage. But each action of authenticity, each second of self-honor, each choice to remain aware, these are the signs of your becoming. Over time, these small actions weave together into a fabric of change. You become an individual who no longer betrays their own core for the sake of calm. You become one who can love without losing themselves, who can feel without being drowned, who can give without fading. You become finally a spirit that owns itself. The unconscious loves paradox, and so it is with you. Having absorbed shadow, you now emit a light that is distinct from before. It is not the untested light of the unmarked empath, but the strengthened light of one who knows shadow. Before, your light was gentle, wide, easily absorbed by those who sought to use it. Now your light is more focused, more clear. A light that can reveal deceptions without being dimmed by them. Others may sense it as both solace and a call, for your presence silently calls for authenticity. Those who wish to stay unaware may push against you, but those who yearn for truth will be attracted to you. This is part of your fate. For the empath who has survived carries not only their own to change, but the potential for rousing others. Picture now another vision. A person dreams they are bearing a weighty bag full of rocks. They strain, hardly able to move. Finally, they fall and the bag spills open and the rocks roll across the earth. But as they look carefully, they see that some of the rocks are gems shining in the dim light. They realize they have been bearing treasure the entire time. Though they believed it was only weight, this is the reality of your survival. You thought you were only carrying hurt, disgrace, blame, but concealed within these were gems, endurance, perception, profundity, insight. Now that the bag has spilled open, you see what was there all along. The work is to claim the gems, to smooth them, to wear them as badges of what you have withstood. Do not discard them in anger, for they are the presence hidden in the load. The deeper reality is this: who you become after taking in the narcissist's shadow is no longer just an empath. You become a seer, of a kind, one who sees past surfaces. You have cultivated an instinct for deceit, a perception not only of feelings, but of the archetypes in motion. You can detect the shadow shifting in others, the persona changing, the projection landing. This is not suspicion but clarity. It is what occurs when one has existed among personas and has learned to tell the difference between the artificial and the real. This ability is perilous, for it sets you apart, but it is also sacred, for it enables you to be of service. You become a beacon for others who are still trapped, not by lecturing, not by compelling, but simply by living the truth that endurance and change are real. Yet, I must tell you something further. The narcissist is not only an external character. It is also an inner pattern. You endured the narcissist outside, but the labor now is to meet the narcissist within. For every one of us holds inside the lure to exaggerate, to reject our own shadow, to feed on others for the ego's appetite. If you do not face this inner narcissist, then you risk turning into what you once rejected. Survival alone does not stop this. Only integration does. When you acknowledge the narcissist within you, the part that desires admiration, that dreads exposure, that aims to dominate, then you are genuinely free. For freedom is not the absence of external oppressors. It is the command of internal energies. The empath who becomes whole is one who has witnessed both the empathic child inside and the narcissistic shadow inside, and has joined them in the self-acceptance. For individuation is the harmonizing of opposites. You are no longer only the receptive child who absorbs, nor the toughened survivor who defends, but the integrated person who contains both. You can be resilient and kind, perceptive and caring, powerful and soft. You do not cling to one identity, but permit the totality of your spirit to unfold. And in this totality, you discover freedom. For freedom is not the power to control others as the narcissist thinks, but the power to be yourself without dread, without deception, without reliance on personas. This is what you are becoming, step by step, vision by vision, action by action. So when you ask, who am I now after all of this? The answer cannot be given in one label. You are not only empath, not only survivor, not only wounded healer. You are all of these and beyond. You are the paradox, the enigma, the living emblem of what it means to hold shadow and still shine. You are the soul, remade. You are the reminder that the spirit cannot be eliminated, that even when contaminated, it can convert the toxin into a cure. You are the mythical bird, the underworld goddess, the champion, the alchemist. You are the one who has traveled through an end and found life waiting beyond. And now we reach the peak, the place where the journey of survival, of descent and return shows its ultimate significance. You have asked, who does the empath become after absorbing the narcissist's shadow and enduring? We have followed the phases of ending and rebirth, of shadow and alchemy, of quiet and awakening. But the final truth cannot be conveyed only in psychological language. It must be spoken in the tongue of the soul. For what has happened is not merely recovery. It is a rite of passage. The empath who has survived has crossed over into a new way of existing, one that carries both the scent of the eternal and the reality of human limitation. To describe this is challenging, for words stumble before the mystical, yet we must attempt, for the psyche needs expression of what it has withstood, lest it stay unformed inside. When you survive the narcissist, you have encountered a profound distortion, not as a theory, but as a personal reality. You have witnessed how the persona can consume, how charisma can hide brutality, how love can be bent into a tool, You have felt the emptiness that lives in those who deny their shadow, the vacuum behind their gaze. To face this and not break is a monumental feat. It is to gaze into the core of the collective shadow. For the narcissist is not only an individual but a representation of what culture itself suppresses. The craving for power, the fear of authenticity, the denial of truth. To survive them is to hold inside yourself a fragment of collective labor. You have looked into what most would rather ignore, and in looking, you have become a bearer of knowing. This knowing cannot be erased, nor should it be. It is the bedrock of your transformation. But transformation is not the finale. Integration is. To integrate means to weave the shadow you have faced into the tapestry of your being, not as poison but as insight. You no longer say that did not touch me. Instead you say it touched me, but it did not consume me. It marked me, but it also inscribed me with purpose. This is why your injuries are important. They are not errors to be removed, but markings carved by the unconscious. They tell you that you have traveled the road of descent and that you hold the authority of lived experience. Authority not in the sense of dominance over others, but in the sense of being real. Others may dispute your thoughts, but they cannot dispute your existence. You embody survival, and that embodiment itself is proof. Here lies the paradox of your destiny. You are no longer merely empath, for empathy, in its original form, has passed away. You are no longer merely survivor, for survival by itself is incomplete. You have become something more complex, more potent, more formidable, more sacred. You are the wounded healer, but also the shadow knower, the one who has walked both brightness and darkness. You are a living testament that humanity cannot be split into the harmed and the harmers, light and shadow, purity and distortion. You know now that all reside within the psyche. You have met them in others and you have met them in yourself, and because you know this, you can no longer be fooled by surfaces. You see beneath personas. You see the archetypes acting behind masks. You sense the flows of shadow and brightness moving through dialogues, connections, cultures. This sight is both a gift and a weight, for it divides you from the dreams that comfort the masses. But it also grants you liberty, for truth, though it separates, always liberates. At this stage, you may feel disconnected. You may move through the world and perceive what others miss. You may note how readily people are enchanted by charm, how they adore images, how they give up their spirits to dreams. And you may feel tired, for you cannot go back to that initial state. Yet I tell you, do not lose hope, for your disconnection is also your calling. You are not meant to fit into the old molds, but to reveal new paths. You are a seed of individuation in a collective that favors sameness. You are a murmur of authenticity in a cacophony of masks. You may not be comprehended by the many, but you will be known by those who are prepared. And when they know you, they will see in your marks the chart of their own endurance. Let's return then to the language of visions. Imagine a person who dreams. They are standing on the edge of a great sea at night. The water pounds fiercely and they feel fear, for they know they could be taken, but then they see that the water shines softly as if lit from below. They step into the sea expecting to be submerged, but instead they are buoyed, carried not by terror but by luminescence. They awaken and weep, understanding that the very thing they feared, the deep, has become the very thing that holds them. This is the heart of your transformation. What once menaced to erase you has become the medium that supports you. The narcissist shadow, though damaging, forced you into the sea of the unconscious, and there you found that you could be buoyed not because you were powerful, but because the self was holding you all along. Survival showed you that the psyche is vaster than any personal wound, that the soul holds depths you had not imagined. And so, who have you become? You have become one who trusts the depths. You no longer dread darkness, for you know it is where the beginnings of light are buried. You no longer dread suffering, for you know it is the crucible of purpose. You no longer dread betrayal, for you know that even betrayal cannot erase the soul's ability to be remade. You live now with a different tempo, a different anchor. You do not hurry to repair, to save, to melt into others. You stand firm in yourself, and from that firmness, you offer compassion. It is not the frantic compassion of the former empath, but the stable compassion of the awakened spirit. You give not because you are compelled, but because you decide. And in deciding, you are free. This freedom is the harvest of individuation. In choosing, you are free. It is the freedom to be yourself, without a mask, without an act, without the need to satisfy or to rescue. It is the freedom to welcome your shadow, to acknowledge your rage, your anxiety, your need, and still know you are complete. It is the freedom to gaze into the eyes of another, whether they wear the mask of narcissism or the face of purity, and to see the archetypes in action without losing your center in them. It is the freedom for which the spirit longs, the freedom that makes existence meaningful. And so, my friends, when you ask, who do I become after surviving? The answer is this: you become yourself, finally. Not the self described by others, not the self cast upon you, not the self given up to dreams, but the self that has always been waiting in the depths. You become the one who can say with truth and with force, I am, and that I am is not pride, not narcissism, but authenticity. It is the voice of the soul coming from the silence, announcing its presence without excuse. It is the culmination of individuation, the merging of shadow and light, the reconciliation of agony and meaning, the awakening of the timeless within the temporary. If you listen carefully, you may hear even now the voice of the self within you. It does not praise, it does not lie, it does not control, it whispers, you are complete, you always were. Even when you felt you were in pieces, you always were. Even when you held another's darkness, you always were. Even when you believed you would not make it, you are complete. And now you know it. And this knowing is the present of your journey. For to know completeness is to live no longer in fear, but in trust. Trust of yourself, trust of the psyche, trust of the mystery that upholds us all. This, then, is the ultimate transformation. You are no longer empath, no longer victim, no longer even survivor. You are a soul awakened to its own depth, a being who carries within them both shadow and light, and who walks the earth with the authority of one who has persevered. You are the answer to the question you once feared to ask. You are the one who has become. If this exploration of the soul's journey has resonated with you, please support this work by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more journeys into the inner world.